What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the ShowMeFootball.com podcast. Today, we are doing a post-game review of Mizzou, Texas A&M. Mizzou loses at home to the Aggies by a final score of 35-14. And this game went about as I expected it, to be quite honest. I mean, it's really the same story that every other Mizzou game has been so far. But today I'm joined by Connor as always. So I'm going to let him kind of kick it off with the in-depth thoughts. So Connor, your initial thoughts on today's game.
Yeah, sorry ass game, sorry ass defense. Connor Bazelak looks bad. Yada yada yada. Same BS we do every week. Gonna be dead ass. I fell asleep multiple times during this game because frankly I've stopped caring about this team. But the thing that really bothered me about today was that post game, and you think I'm overreacting, other people think I'm overreacting, but I really don't care. I'm gonna go on this little spiel anyway. But Drinkwitz said something along the lines of, I think I set expectations too high last year or something like that. And that to me is complete bullshit because the expectation for any college football team should be you beat whoever they put in front of you. That should be your goal. That should be what you strive for. And even if you obviously we're not going to win the national championship this year. Like that was a foregone conclusion. But you still should operate with the mentality that you are going to try. You are in the Southeastern Conference. You are going up against the heavyweights of college football. Your Georgias, your Alabamas, occasionally LSU gets hot. You can't come out here and just think that you need to reach expectations. Jimbo Fisher said that his goal is to get Texas A&M to a point and work with the mentality that Texas A&M can't upset anybody. Texas A&M can only be upset. And that should be the mentality that every football team operates under. That's how Texas A&M beat Alabama last week, because they went in with the mentality that we're not going to get our ass kicked by Alabama. We're just as good as Alabama, and they won. And just the idea that Mizzou is operating under the idea that they're not on par with these schools is frankly pathetic. Even though they're not, if you are a coach, your job is to push these players as far as they can go and get the absolute best out of them and have them reach their potential. And if you sit there and say, oh, well, I think expectations are a little too high for us this year, you are not doing that. You need to push them as far as they possibly can go. And that is pushing for a national championship. Even though you're not going to get it, you have to try. It's the old saying, shoot for the stars, hit the moon. You know, it's the same thing. You have to go through every week under the assumption that you are going to beat the shit out of whoever you play Saturday. Because if you don't think you're going to win, what the hell is the point of even putting on the pads? If you don't think that you can win, get the hell out of the locker room so someone who does think they can win can come in. It is just asinine that we employ someone who doesn't think that we can win. Even if we can't, you need to at least have people that believe in themselves, or else you're never going to win shit.
Okay, here's what I'll say to that. First of all, when he says that, I don't necessarily think that he doesn't think Mizzou can win when they play. He's saying now, looking back at their record, because obviously a lot of fans are upset that they're 3-4. Drinkwitz is saying with all the offseason and social media hype that he raised expectations too much for fans, and now they're disappointed when in reality, this was always going to be a rebuild and Drinkwitz overachieved in year one. Secondly, Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M saying that and then beating Alabama, your whole point there, that is a little more understandable than Mizzou saying that, because here's the thing. Texas A&M is infinitely more talented than Mizzou. So, like, yes, I agree with you that coaches should always have the mentality like Texas A&M actually had the capability to beat Bama, as we saw, because they have the talent to stack up with them. Mizzou just doesn't. Like, they literally did not have a chance to win this game. They're not that kind of team. That being said, I don't think that's something Drinkwitz should come out and say publicly, but I know that's what a lot of coaches probably feel about their team behind closed doors. So it should have just been kept behind closed doors.
even if it's a closed doors thing, you do not show that in front of the team, and you especially do not show that in front of the media. We've seen Dan Campbell crying because of how hard the Lions have worked and how close they've come to a couple of these wins despite being winless. That team, even though the Detroit Lions suck, Dan Campbell has them playing with heart. Where's the heart on this Missouri team?
That I will agree with. There's not a
Drinkwitz
lot
is
of heart.
coaching like a loser and a pussy. And if Dan Campbell was talking about how he knows eventually these guys are going to be on the right side of some of these wins. Is that going to happen? Probably not. You know why? Because there's not much talent on that Detroit Lions roster. But they believe in themselves and they are trying. They are playing with heart, which is what you need to do to upset some of these teams. Mizzou does not have that. They don't have that at all. And Drinkwitz isn't bringing any of that at all. So what's the point?
I agree with that. You know what? We'll get back into that talk because I think we have a nice discussion going. But I want to talk about the game specifically a little bit because there's a lot to say. So first thing, I think Mizzou. I think, this is a very small moral victory, but the score makes it look closer than the game actually was. And even then, it wasn't all that close. But the important thing is that the final score isn't so bad to where it's getting national attention like the game against Tennessee was. Like, everyone was talking about that in a bad way. Like, you want to talk about recruits potentially second guessing about where they're going to go and could that affect Mizzou if they have so many bad losses. The important thing is this wasn't 45-7 Texas A&M. 35-14 looks a lot better, even though Texas A&M, I feel like, let up on the gas pedal a little bit. Like, there was one point in the second half where the Texas A&M player just was a yard short of the first down, but Jimbo Fisher said, we're just going to punt it. But we all knew, that entire stadium knew, that if Texas A&M went for it, they were going to get the first down easily. But the important thing is the score. Like, if you're just someone that sees that final score at the bottom of your ESPN bar, you're not going, oh man, they got killed. Like, you're thinking, that's about what I expected. Texas A&M versus Missouri. Texas A&M is a better program. They just came off beating the number one team in the country. Like, hey, that's a respectable game. We all know Texas A&M probably could have won this game 60-0 if they wanted to, though.
That's a moral victory to you?
Yes.
That's a good thing? How bad are we to the point where not being completely annihilated is a victory? Are you fucking kidding me? We're happy about that?
Yeah.
No, there's nothing to be happy about there. I use the boxing analogy a lot when it comes to college football because I think it really fits with like fighter rankings and team rankings and just, like the order of power. And if you don't like at least expect to go the distance with the heavyweight champion, don't get in the fucking ring. Like, there's no point in showing up on Saturday if we are going to play for moral victories like this. There is no heart in this team, so there's no point in going out. Like, Drinkwitz isn't having this team fight. There's no fight in this dog at all. And even if we are going to lose every week, they need to at least look like they give a shit. I'm sure these players love, the free tuition, the clout on campus, having their choice of sorority girls. But guess what? You have to be good to get any of that. Is it possible to just like completely revoke their scholarships? Because right now there's not a single player on this team that deserves to be getting free tuition.
Tyler Beatty is probably the only one.
And Tyler Beatty's going to be gone for the NFL, so he's not a building block on this team at all. After Tyler Beatty leaves, who's worth a shit on this team other than Harrison Mevis? Nobody. This entire team is a fucking disgrace to the Southeastern Conference.
Gosh, there's so much to talk about.
There's not. They just suck. There's nothing to say other than they suck.
I didn't say there were good things to talk about. I said there were things to talk about. Number one, I think a lot of people, this was the first game I feel like the Mizzou offense truly was like arguably worse than the defense. Like, the defense, we know the defense is bad to this point. Like, it's something we're going to have to deal with for the rest of the year. You just hope they're not a dumpster fire. Unfortunately, they've been a dumpster fire for every single game, but the bar is that they're not a dumpster fire. I think today you can make an argument that the offense was worse than the defense. And I've seen a lot of people make excuses for Connor Bazelak. I jumped off the Bazelak ship several weeks ago already, but people were saying, well, it's hard for him when the defense is playing so bad, puts more pressure on him, and the offensive line doesn't do him a lot of favors. But today, he just sucked. Like, there is no defending Bazelak, and it got to a point where, I was saying, well, I had been saying that we need to see someone different at quarterback, but you saw a lot more people on that side too that they should have pulled Bazelak and gave Tyler Macon a shot or gave Brady Cook a shot. And it's not to say that Connor Bazelak was never going to be the starter again, or that he was going to be benched, but in that moment, you have to, if you're Drinkwitz, you have to say to Bazelak, look, you're still my guy going forward, but you're just not giving us anything. And we're just going to try something else. Look, it's already 21-0. The game is over. We're just going to see if someone else can give us a spark. This doesn't mean you've lost your job, but it's time we see something more. And to me, after that one Bazelak interception, I think it was the second one of the day. It made absolutely no sense why Drinkwitz trotted him back out there. I mean, I get you don't want him to lose all of his confidence and you want to stick with your guy and all, but at this point, it's not even about that. Like, your quarterback is the second biggest thing that's holding you back right now, and that's holding this team back. Drinkwitz, a lot of the times, is willing to admit that he's wrong about things. There's two things as of right now that he's failing to admit that's holding this team back, and that's the defensive coordinator, Steve Wilkes, who we'll get into, and the starting quarterback. Connor Bazelak needs to be benched. I mean, he was god freaking awful today.
Well, it comes back to the entire there's no fight in this team. Maybe if they
but even before today, hold on, to cut you off real quick. That's something that I haven't really liked about Bazelak, even before the season kind of went off the rails a little bit. That he's not an energetic guy. He's not a vocal guy. He's not a leader. Like, do you remember watching Will Levis on Kentucky play against Mizzou, and how that guy, he was pumping his team up after every first down, and he was running over Mizzou defenders, and like, he just had that it factor. Connor Bazelak doesn't have an it factor, and it's hard for guys to get behind him because of that.
He doesn't even need that. Connor Bazelak can be the quarterback of a team that has fight in it, but Mizzou just does not have it. It's a culture thing. It's a coaching issue. That's where the motivation and the it factor comes in. Kind of like how we've seen Arkansas fight. Yeah, Arkansas has lost some pretty bad games this year, but they've also come out and they've whooped some ass. You know why? That's because they rally around Sam Pittman. Even though he has a shtick, it's a shtick that gets them to fight. And this Missouri team doesn't fight. They really don't seem like they give a shit anymore. And they didn't seem like they gave a shit towards the end of last year either. They got hyped up after that LSU game, but after the team kind of fell apart towards the end, there hasn't been much fight in this team at all.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think there is a lack of aggressiveness and passion from a lot of the players on this team, but the coaches are always going to take responsibility first when it comes to that sort of issue. But I'll ask you this.
Well, the coaches are the ones who created the culture.
Yeah.
And
so
in college football, everything comes down to the coaches.
So I'll ask you this. Is this just a little stumble for you that, you think the coaches can improve on, or was today a day where you kind of looked at Drinkwitz funny and, kind of question if he's the guy moving forward?
If this next recruiting class doesn't play well, I want Drinkwitz gone. Like, literally the only reason that I'm still tolerating his shit right now is to see what like we have in like Sam Horn and whatever other recruit comes in, because he is recruiting at a higher level than we've ever seen at Mizzou. But at the same time, why are we comparing him to what other coaches have done at Mizzou? Why are we setting the bar so low? Because this program has accomplished nothing in its 100 years of playing football. Why set the expectations so low? Why aren't we expecting to be a competent SEC team? Why are we just like okay with being a middle of the tier pack team that can occasionally jump up like we were with Pinkel? Why do we compare him to the rest of Missouri history? We should be comparing him to the rest of the SEC. And I am not one to settle for mediocrity. And I think that the goal of every program should be doing everything they can to compete for a championship, and having a loser pussy mentality is not that. I'm not expecting this team to win a championship, but I'm expecting them to do everything in their power to do that. And I am no longer getting that vibe from Drinkwitz anymore. And if I don't see any change, yeah, let's get someone new. I'm tired of this shit.
Here's the thing. Drinkwitz, I'm not that close yet. I mean, I think today gave people some pause. I think this season overall has given people some pause on Drinkwitz, and rightfully so. I think he's done some bad things, and we'll talk about that more, especially the play calling, because I have a huge problem with his play calling. But his own, this is still, and I don't want to like do this thing again where we could just kind of blame Odom and his recruiting, and this is all Odom players, because that's not the only issue. Like, we can't just keep blaming the Odom recruits, but Drinkwitz's only recruiting class is only true freshman right now. Like, he needs time, and really Missouri can't afford to fire Drinkwitz before the end of his 4-year contract is up. They just fired Barry Odom not that long ago. Like, they need Drinkwitz to be good. You can't keep going through coach after coach when there's one common denominator, and it's sucky players. And Drinkwitz is finally bringing in players that we think don't suck, at least according to the online rankings. So if he can keep that up, I'm still going to be hopeful, because here's the thing. Gary Pinkel only won 4 games in his first year at Missouri. Gary Pinkel only won 5 games in his second year at Missouri. And if Missouri fans think Drinkwitz is going to be anything, you have to give him time. You can't just fire a coach after 2 disappointing seasons when he's trying to take over for the old guy and cycle that stuff out. Now, I will say I have some issues with Drinkwitz. Like I said, the play calling. And you know what? We'll just get right into that. I had questioned a lot of Drink's play calls to this point, and I think he's being way too conservative. But today was one of those what the hell games from Drink, because there were so many points where I'm just like, has this guy even coached football before? There was one point in the second half where it was 3rd and 9, and they're about to enter Texas A&M territory. They really needed a touchdown, and they run it up the middle with Tyler Beatty, which, by the way, had not worked all day. And it went for like 1 or 2 yards. And by the way, the amount of freaking times, and I wish I had the statistic of how many times they did this in front of me, but they ran it on every single first down up the middle. Try something new. Throw the ball on first down. I am a huge fan of throwing the ball on first down, and I don't even think they tried it once today. And if they did, it was an underneath route that ended up not going anywhere either. But then there was the end of the first half shit that really pissed me off, because that was another scenario where it's like, okay, taking a deep shot or going for some points, like literally, what do you have to lose? The clock is about to hit 0. It's not like Texas A&M is going to get the ball back and do anything. It was what, 2nd or 3rd down, and Drinkwitz just packs it in. They don't even run a play for the last 35 seconds. That you have to take a shot there, or even try to play for the field goal. And I questioned if Drinkwitz's play calling was maybe affected by the fact he doesn't trust his quarterback. But if you don't trust your quarterback, freaking put another quarterback in there. I'm tired of him hiding behind Bazelak and whatever, using it as like a pseudo kind of excuse to, because he never really used Bazelak as an excuse. But I feel like if he were to make an excuse, it would be, well, I don't feel comfortable in my quarterback making a throw downfield. Well, then try someone else. Stop. Just make a change then. And if you're that uncomfortable, like I said, just make a change at quarterback. Really, that would solve a lot of these issues. But the thing that disappoints me most about Drinkwitz's play calling this year is I remember him being a lot more aggressive last year. He was a phenomenal last year with play calling. I felt like there were a few times where maybe I would disagree with him, but for the most part, Drinkwitz last year was pretty aggressive. And I really wish I had the stats in front of me of, the types of plays they ran last year. But, I think Mizzou probably only attempted a 15-yard pass or deeper, maybe 2 or 3 times today. Like, this team whether it's the quarterback or the coach in his play calling, that's the main problem. I mean, they just cannot push the ball downfield. Way too many underneath routes, way too many screens, way too much dancing in the backfield. You got to push the ball downfield in the SEC, and this team just can't do it. And the worst part about Bazelak, too, is if he's not going to do that, you better be able to run. And Bazelak cannot freaking run. He is so slow. And every time they run the option, he gives it to the running back every single time, which makes it even harder for Tyler Beatty because the defense just goes after Tyler Beatty every time on the option because they know Bazelak's not going to keep it. And even if Bazelak does keep it, he's slow as hell and he gets tackled before he even gets anywhere every time.
Okay, it kind of comes back to my whole thing about the culture. Like, Drinkwitz is, if you don't believe in your players, which is kind of what it seems like is the case by telling fans to lower expectations, by saying that we're going to lose to Kentucky, his play calling throughout the entirety of the season thus far, and not throwing it with Connor Bazelak and showing that he doesn't trust his quarterback, just continues to prove my point of him not believing in his players. And how are you going to expect to win when your players won't rally behind the coach? And they're not going to rally behind a guy who doesn't believe in them. And so if he's not going to get aggressive and he's not going to believe in the guys and build a winning culture, then there's no point in him being here. Like, I brought up him potentially hiring an offensive coordinator, and you shot that idea down saying, well, there's no point in having him be here if he's not going to play call. But in college, your head coach is more of a CEO rather than a play caller. If we were talking about a professional team, then yeah, sure, maybe Drinkwitz remains the play caller. But his job is to build a winning culture and winning team. And right now he is not doing that. And his play calling has been a complete liability. And the fact that he hasn't been responsible enough to acknowledge that and hire an offensive coordinator, especially when coordinators are such a major factor in the college game, is yet another red flag.
Yeah. After today, I think I would be willing to hear ideas about offensive coordinators because it's gotten to that point for me. The big reason why I always shot it down is because I feel like an offensive coordinator is always there to use your program as a stepping stone. It's an ego clash with the head coach. And if Drinkwitz isn't calling plays, then he's not really doing anything. You mentioned the CEO aspect, and I agree, but it also makes Drinkwitz, it makes his job easier when he's selling his vision and his offense to recruits rather than kind of, you know, putting that together with an OC and then like having to work around that, if that makes sense. Like it's better if you're hearing it straight from him and it's coming straight from him and it's his offense, his program. But after today, I think it was kind of the last straw for me that maybe that he needs to bring someone in to mix philosophies, blend philosophies, and get some new play calling in here because what we've seen so far this season has just not been good. And maybe with a more dynamic quarterback, it would improve. But again, if you don't trust your quarterback to the point your play calling is that bad, then just put in a new freaking quarterback. And Drinkwitz also said like 6 times after the day in his press conference that he's going to recruit, he's got to go out and recruit. And I think that's an answer to you saying that, he doesn't believe in his own players. And, I can understand that from Drink's perspective because, well, they aren't really his players. A lot of these guys aren't his players. So he doesn't really have a ton of incentive to believe in them. But at the same time, he signed up to take over this program. And, in theory, those are now his players and he can't just shit all over them until the new guys come in because that's not the right way to do it.
Now, how are you going to inspire or convince guys to want to come and join this team when you do nothing but dog on the players that are already here? Like, what about this team that you see right now when a coach dismisses the guys on his roster would make you want to come and play for this team? There's nothing about that would convince a player to come. And, delusional fans are talking about how Luther Burden is going to come here. What do we have that Luther Burden would want other than playing time? Which
NIL
I don't
opportunity.
know. Is there even that much in Columbia, Missouri? You complain on Twitter all the time about how the fans don't support the team. So is there an NIL opportunity even here if the fans aren't supporting the team?
Potentially, but it's a good
If
point.
there's no fan support, no one's going to put money towards the NIL opportunity. It all starts with building a culture that excites the team. And there's nothing exciting about this Tigers team right now. So why should the fans show up? Why should the players care? Why should recruits want to come? There's no culture here. So what's the point? What's the point of putting on the pads every week? What's the point of getting excited and investing money into the team when nobody's happy? Nobody believes in themselves. Nobody thinks we can win. There's no point.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I don't know. To me, you kind of talk a little bit like Drinkwitz said that he literally has given up on the season and the team and that like he hates this player and that player. I mean, I don't quite get that from him yet. Like I get what you're saying. I just don't think it's to that magnitude. Um because today, like I thought they fought in the second half a little bit. Like, yeah, Texas A&M overmatched them and they still really couldn't do a whole lot well, but it's not like they rolled over like your typical Barry Odom team would when they went down big. Like I saw some good things in the second half. I think they only held Texas A&M to what 7 or 14 points in the second half, which again I think a lot of that was Texas A&M taking their foot off the pedal a little bit, but I don't think this team like visibly gave up on Drinkwitz or anything like that.
I'm not saying that the team gave up on Drinkwitz. I'm saying that Drinkwitz gave up on them. And I feel like a good example of that is the Kentucky game, where the entire week leading up to it, his press conference was all this woe is me BS about how they're going to whoop us. And maybe if he got aggressive play calling in the first half, the game ended up being really close and we could have won it if
Yeah.
he believed in his team. And he very clearly doesn't. So if you don't have a coach that believes in his team, you're not going to win anything.
Yeah, no, I agree. He needs to swallow his pride a little bit, but one of his big problems that he's got to deal with, and we may see something develop here within the next day or two, and that's Steve Wilkes. He obviously made a bad defensive coordinator hire in Steve Wilkes, which is a poor reflection again on his decision making. And it's hard to see how Steve Wilkes is here next season, but there's also a possibility he's fired by tomorrow after today.
Quite literally the worst defense in college football.
Yeah, like it's not even close, especially against the run.
And you can't blame Odom's players for this because Odom's teams were never this bad.
No, yeah, and they
Nobody
weren't
is ever
well, and the
this
thing
bad.
is they weren't this bad last year either. Like the defense was not great last year from Mizzou, but they weren't this bad that they are this year. And it's not like they lost Nick Bolton and some NFL starters, but I thought they had enough behind them to where like they could still be okay. But I mean, they can't stop a nosebleed.
There is no excuse for this defense, and you have to make some major change, or else you're never going to grow. If you stand pat and just keep rolling with what you have, you're never going to get any better.
I always said for the longest time that if like a lot of people say it's a bad look on Drinkwitz if he fires Wilkes, which I agree because that was his handpicked guy. At the same time, he's going to look even worse if he keeps him any longer because the defense, Steve Wilkes just isn't the guy. He's not. I mean, his defense is horrible. Like you said, worse in the country. Like you got to make a change, man. You really do.
Well, it's kind of like how we've talked about in the past, like the team not wanting to spend a lot of money on coaching because the football team operates in the red or this and that. But if you don't invest in it, it's never going to make any money. And the same thing goes for the coaching staff, that if you don't fire the bad ones and try to make better hires, then they're just going to continue to suck. So I don't know how you can expect more when you don't actively try to make the team better. Like we've seen what Wilkes is at this point. I don't care if it's your first year, if you have the worst defense, out of 130 teams in college football, you need to go.
Yeah, because that's not all talent. Like, do I think Mizzou needs more horses on defense? Yes. Do I think that their talent equates to the 130th ranked team in college football and defense? No. A change has to be made. And it sucks because I was a fan of the Wilkes hire when it first happened, but he just cannot get his scheme down to college players. And also, it seems like guys have regressed. Like Trajan Jeffcoat is not near the player that he was last year. Kobe Whiteside isn't either. Devin Nicholson has taken a huge step back. The coaching staff talked up Jalen Carley's, who will have some big plays here and there, but he just cannot understand pursuit angles whatsoever. I mean, this team lacks basic fundamentals on the defensive side of the ball, let alone getting down Steve Wilkes' scheme. I mean, they can't tackle. They have horrible angles on all tackles. They don't know where to be ever. They're horrible. You have to make an example out of somebody. And Drinkwitz did this whole thing after the Tennessee game where the depth chart's wide open, jobs are open. And for the most part, it's been the same guys who started in the Tennessee game still playing most of the snaps. So that was all bullshit.
Yeah, there hasn't been any changes made. There's been no active, or they haven't tried anything to get better. And that comes back down to culture.
Yeah. Another criticism I have too is that even though we give Drinkwitz a lot of credit for his recruiting to this point, which he deserves, he absolutely failed in the transfer portal this past offseason. Who did they get from the transfer portal that has been an impact player? Blaze Aldridge isn't good at anything but blitzing.
Is he even that good at that?
Yeah.
He's slow. He can't tackle. He's undersized.
The two Tulsa corners have been huge disappointments. Caleb Evans has been fine, nothing spectacular. Who else am I missing? Gosh, I'm missing a big one. Anyway, though. Oh yeah, Mookie Cooper. Sorry, he just hasn't made an impact this year. He didn't even play today. He was on the sidelines in street clothes. Like there was a lot of hype around Mookie Cooper, and I think Mookie Cooper can still be a factor on this offense going forward. But you just haven't seen a lot of impact from the transfer portal for this team, and that's a huge red flag. It seems like this team can't really identify talent.
And it seems like our players have regressed too, like you were talking about earlier with Trajan Jeffcoat. And before Rakestraw tore his ACL, he looked fine and against Jalen Waddle, which against a healthy Jalen Waddle, looking fine is a big achievement in his first start. And since then, he's gotten progressively worse. So I don't know how we are failing to develop talent so badly in the game of college football, where developing talent is the name of the game. But
yeah, it's not fun to be a Mizzou fan right now.
When is it ever fun to be a Mizzou fan?
The best thing you have to look forward to right now is Luther Burden's commitment this week.
That's not going to happen.
I still think he's going to pick Mizzou, but
why would he? What on this team would make someone want to say, yes, this is where I want to be?
Here's the thing, Connor. If it was based on which team is better, if Luther Burden's commitment was based on which teams is better and where he's going to win the most games, Missouri would not be in his top 3 schools because no one was expecting Missouri to be
It's
great
not
this year
even
anyway.
that. What is appealing about Missouri?
Well, you're not going to like the answer, but playing time. I mean, that's the selling point to recruits right now. Come in here and play immediately because the guy in front of you sucks, quite frankly.
Well, yeah, that's pretty obvious, but that's what happened with Mookie Cooper. How well did that work out? And the only
but the difference with Mookie Cooper is he hadn't even played football in 3 years before transferring here and never played at Ohio State. That was someone you took a gamble on that you think, coming closer to home, buried on the depth chart at Ohio State, maybe he's better here. When in reality, there was always a chance that maybe he's just not very good at football.
But and he's not.
You're banking on the potential of high school recruits, which is a lot of the times pays off more.
I'm not holding my breath on Luther Burden because as a 5-star receiver, he's probably going to get playing time. just about anywhere he goes. And coming here, the only way that he's going to end up coming here is if Sam Horn, if his pitch really worked out. Because there's like this friend group of Sam Horn, Max Wisner, and really the majority of the 2022 class has like this idea of what they could become here. And they are coming here because they want to play with each other. So if Luther Burden wants to be part of that group with Wisner and Horn and all the others, then yeah, maybe he'll come. But outside of that, there's nothing appealing about this school at all.
Yeah, I mean, as a depressed fan, I can understand that thinking. I still think he'll probably pick Mizzou in all
It's not
likelihood.
even a depressed fan perspective. It's just looking objectively. What does Mizzou have that or over Georgia
But see, by
or
that,
whatever?
logic, if you're using that logic, then Mizzou should have 0 kids in their recruiting class.
No, like I said, like the kids who are coming here are the Max Wisners and Sam Horn, who are part of this friend group who wants to play with each other. Maybe Burden wants to be a part of that, but if he doesn't, we have no shot.
That's
And
not
it's just a
necessarily
formality
true,
of him
though.
being here because there's no other reason to want to come here.
Well, I hope you're happy when he commits here on Tuesday.
It's not going to happen.
All right, whatever you say. We'll leave it at that. We'll ask you guys in the comments, since there's not much else positive to talk about. What do you think Luther Burden is going to do with his decision on Tuesday? So
Georgia.
make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you thought of today's Mizzou game and what your concerns are with this team. We'll hear that from you as well. But yeah, all that being said, we will see you guys in the next one.